Welcome back to another episode of SmoothBrainEDH, where we make the smoothest plays with the biggest brains. This week, we have a game featuring one of our patrons and our favorite Australian, Robbo. We decided to surprise him by playing decks all inspired by him, so let's see what this game has in store. First up is Jason on Goro-Goro and Satoru. This deck hopes to use Hasty Boys in order to make a big ol' flying dragon army to beat down his opponents. His opening hand has an island, an exotic orchard, a skull clamp, a lightning greaves, an arcane denial, an Ardaz, cobbler of war, and a Grazilax, Illithid scholar. Up next is Caden playing Ovika, Enigma Goliath. This deck wants to ramp early in order to land its sticky commander and then cast tons of non-creature spells to make oodles of goblins. He starts the game with 2 islands, a mountain, a goblin bombardment, a blasphemous act, a third path iconoclast, and a chrome host seed shark. Our third player is Robbo, who brought Gimli, Mournful Avenger. Robbo's description of this deck is a Gruul token deck with a bunch of sack outlets to make Gimli indestructible and have him fight everything and then win with said tokens or a large Gimli. His starting hand is a forest, a myriad landscape, a tome of legends, a nature's lore, Tyvar's stand, Tindershoot Dryad, and a siege gang commander. Up last is Matt on Ruric Thar, the Unbowed. This chonky lad no like you casting non-creature. Big punchies only. He keeps a hand with a forest, an exotic orchard, a wooded foothills, an elvish mystic, Sereth, the Viper's Fang, a Bane of Progress, and a primordial sage. We're about to hop right into that game, but before that, go ahead and give us a like and subscribe, and if you want to be notified when we upload, ring that notification bell. We post new gameplay videos every week, so you won't want to miss out. Huge shout out to our patrons. We really appreciate the support you guys give us. Link to our Patreon is in the description, as well as links to all of our deck lists, our social media, our podcast channel, and our public Discord server. Our channel is partnered with Dragon Shield, so if you're looking to pick up any new sleeves or magic related products, check out our affiliate link in the description. And we're also partnered with Inked Gaming, so if you're looking to make any custom playmats, use our affiliate link also in the description. Also, just a reminder from last week, thanks to Dragon Shield, we're going to be able to make it out to MagicCon Las Vegas, so we look forward to meeting all of you and getting to jam some games with you. Now, on to the gameplay.
It looks like Caden wins the die roll, and he'll play a basic mountain, then pass to Robbo. And we'll see a myriad landscape hit the battlefield, and the turn is passed to Matt, who decides he wants to start the game at 37 life instead of 40 by playing Wooded Foothills and fetching for an untapped Stomping Ground. Then he'll cast Elvish Mystic and pass the turn to Jason, who plays Exotic Orchard into Skull Clamp, and then he'll pass to Caden, who drops his own Exotic Orchard, and then he'll cast Impact Tremors and pass the turn to Robbo. And Robbo starts off with a forest, and then he casts Nature's Lore. He says he's going to go find a tapped Stomping Ground and passes to Matt while he searches. Matt plays yet another Exotic Orchard, then he'll tap for 2 and cast Sack Daddy. He'll then move to combat, and the Battle Mystic will hit Caden for 1. The turn is then passed to Jason, and he'll play an island into Lightning Greaves, and then the turn is passed back to Caden, who will play an island, then he'll tap for 3 and cast Chrome Host Seed Shark. And then the turn is passed to Robbo. He'll play another forest, then tap for 4 and cast Arasta of the Endless Web. And then he'll pass the turn to Matt, who stops on end step to activate Sack Daddy and find a basic to the battlefield tapped. That basic is a mountain, then he'll move to his turn and play a basic forest. Then he'll tap for 4 and cast Sereth, the Viper's Fang. And then with his last untapped land, he casts Ragavan, and then the turn is passed to Jason. He starts off with a Scalding Tarn, and he'll fetch for an untapped Watery Grave with it. Then he'll tap for 3 and cast Goro-Goro and Satoru, who immediately get booted. The turn is then passed to Caden, and he'll play Storm-Carved Coast into Third Path Iconoclast. Then he casts Goblin Bombardment, which triggers both of his creatures, so he gets a 1/1 and an Incubator token with 2 counters. The turn is then passed to Robbo, and he starts off with 3 visits. And he'll find Cinderglade untapped to the battlefield. And then he passes the turn to Matt, who starts off with a Castle Garenbrig, and then he'll move to combat and swing his monkey at Jason, and when it attacks, it becomes tapped, so it gains Death Touch. No blocks, so Jason will exile a land, and Matt makes a treasure token. Then Matt will tap for 6 and cast Ruric Thar. Then the turn is passed to Jason, and he starts off with Mistcloaked Herald, and he'll immediately equip the Lightning Greaves to it as well. Jason will then move to combat and poke Matt for 1. And you better believe Goro-Goro and Satoru will trigger, and Jason gets a 5/5 dragon. Lightning Greaves are then moved back to the commander, and then the Herald is skull clamped so Jason can draw 2 cards. And he's able to find his land drop, so he'll play Shipwreck Marsh and then pass to Caden, who plays another island. And he's not a big fan of this Ruric Thar on the field, so he drops Blasphemous Act and gets domed for 6. A lot of triggers go on the stack, and in response to them, Caden will sacrifice his 3 creatures to ping Matt for 3. Then all the triggers resolve, so Robbo makes a 1/2 spider that dies, Caden makes a 1/1 that dies, but it does also triggers Impact Tremors, and then he'll get a 9 countered Incubator token. And then the Blasphemous Act resolves. Caden will then pass the turn, and Robbo stops on end step to crack his Myriad Landscape to get 2 mountains. Then Robbo will move to his turn and cast Tendershoot Dryad. Jason said that's too good though, and he'll Arcane Denial it. Hey, at least they get some cards out of it. The turn is then passed to Matt, and Robbo will draw 2, and Jason will draw 1. And then Matt says, hey, I like board wipes too, here's a Bane of Progress. Caden will respond by flipping both of his Incubator tokens and then sacrificing them to Goblin Bombardment to hit Matt for 2, and then it resolves. The turn is then passed to Jason, and he starts off with a Bajuka Bog targeting Matt. Then he'll tap for 3 and cast Grazilax. Then he'll cast Thousand Face Shadow, and then the turn is passed to Caden, who starts off with a Fabled Passage, and then he'll tap for 2 and cast an Arcane Signet. Then the turn is passed to Robbo. He'll start off by casting Siege Gang Commander, which makes him 3 1/1s when it ETBs. Then we're back to Matt's turn, and he'll just play a Forest, then cast Ruric Thar again. After this he moves to combat, and he'll bonk Caden for 7, and then pass the turn to Jason. Jason will immediately move to combat, and he swings his 1/1 Flyer at Robbo, and Grazilax at Caden. Caden responds by cracking his Fabled Passage for a mountain, and then they both take their damage. And because of how Grazilax is worded, Jason gets to draw 2 cards since he hit 2 opponents. Post-combat, he'll cast a Baleful Strix to draw another card, and then unfortunately he misses his land drop and passes to Caden. Caden plays another mountain as land for turn, and then he'll tap for 7 and cast Ovika. And yes, that is the back of a Magic card. Caden could not find his copy of Ovika anywhere and didn't have the time to proxy it, so here, you get Banana Cat. And then he passes the turn to Robbo, who starts off by tapping for 3 and casting Gimli. And then we see Ashnod's Altar drop. But it comes at a hefty price, 6 damage from Ruric Thar. He'll then pass the turn, and Matt starts off with Wood Elves. So he finds a forest to the battlefield. Matt will then move to combat and swing Thar at Robbo and his Bane of Progress at Caden. Robbo will put one of his goblins under Thar, then before damage, he'll sacrifice 3 of them to his Ashnod's Altar, and Gimli will trigger 3 times. When the third one resolves, he'll have Gimli fight Ruric Thar, and Gimli is indestructible and 6 power, so Thar will die. Then Caden will just take his 7 damage. Matt will then pass the turn to Jason, and Jason stops on instep to flash in Orcish Bowmasters. ETB trigger, he'll deal 1 to Wood Elves, and then he starts his Orc army. Now on Jason's turn, he'll immediately move to combat, and he swings Grazilac and Bowmasters at Matt, and his Flyer at Robbo. And upon connecting, Jason draws 2 cards. Post-combat, he'll play a tap Steam Vents, then he recasts Goro-Goro and Satoru, and then the turn is passed to Caden. And Jason discards Urabrask's Forge on his cleanup. Now on Caden's turn, he overloads Cyclonic Rift. And while he did pay 7 mana for it, it is still just a 2 CMC spell, so he makes 2 1/1 goblins. Caden will then move to combat, hit Jason for 2, and Matt for 6 commander. The turn is then passed to Robbo, and he starts off with a mountain. He'll then cast Tome of Legends into Gimli, so it'll have 2 counters on it. He'll then cast a Swiftfoot Boots, so he doesn't have to discard, and then he passes the turn to Matt. And Matt starts off by tapping for 7 and casting Zopandrel, Hunger Dominus. The turn is then passed to Jason, who starts off with Ardaz. He'll then recast Goro-Goro and Satoru, and then he'll move to combat and hit Caden with Ardaz. When it hits, he gets to make a 5/5. Jason will then pass the turn, and he has to discard 3 cards. The only notable one is Faithless Looting. Now on Caden's turn, he'll start off by casting Thrill of Possibility, and he discards a mountain. Then he'll play Reliquary Tower as land for turn. He'll then tap for 6 mana, and then tap 4 of his goblins to cast Explosive Singularity. Caden targets Jason's face with it, but Jason's got the Spell Pierce, baby! So it's countered, but Caden still gets 10 goblins. And you better believe those goblins are now on blocking duty, so he passes the turn to Robbo, who starts off by equipping Gimli with the Swiftfoot Boots. Then he'll drop the Siege Gang Commander again, making 3 more goblins. Then the turn is passed to Matt, and he starts off with his Primordial Sage. Then he drops Dockside Extortionist. He'll draw a card, make 3 treasures, then play Prismatic Vista. He'll then pass to Jason, who will swing 5 in the air at Caden. Caden smells the trap here, but he can't afford to lose 5 life. So he blocks the 5/5 with his 6/6 Ovika, and Jason flashes in Orcish Bowmasters. ETB trigger, the 1 damage is pointed at Ovika, and Jason pays the 3 mana and 3 life. So between an arrow and a dragon, Ovika will die. And that pretty much costed Jason his whole turn, so he'll just pass the turn to Caden after this. He'll cast a Mind Stone, then immediately crack it for a card, and Bowmasters will ping one of his goblins. Caden will then pass the turn, and Robbo stops on instep to activate his tome to draw a card, and this time Bowmaster pings one of Robbo's goblins, which triggers Gimli. Robbo will then move to his turn, and then drop Avenger of Zendikar. 7 plant tokens are created, and then he'll pass the turn to Matt, who fetches with Prismatic Vista for a forest on instep. Then on his turn, he'll recast Ruric Thar. And when Thar is cast, Matt draws a card, then Bowmasters will ping Robbo's goblin. And Gimli triggers again. The turn is then passed to Jason, and he starts off with his Baleful Strix. It gets +2/+0 when it enters the battlefield. Then he'll play a swamp as land for turn. After this, he pays 2 mana to Goro-Goro and Satoru to give all his creatures haste, and then he'll attack Robbo with his 3/1 Baleful Strix. And upon connecting, Jason gets a dragon, then he'll pass the turn to Caden. And guess what? Ovika's back. And then the turn is passed to Robbo, who starts off with a Mosswort Bridge. He'll hide away a card, Avenger of Zendikar will trigger, and then he casts Goblin Bombardment and gets domed by Ruric Thar. The turn is then passed to Matt, who starts off with a forest. Then he drops Kogla. He draws a card from casting it, and then Bowman will ping a Caden Goblin. When Kogla ETBs, Matt will have it fight Avenger of Zendikar, but Robbo responds with Tyvar's Stand, X0, to give his Avenger of Zendikar indestructible and hexproof, and then he gets domed for 6. Matt will then attempt to move to combat, but Robbo has a response and he'll sacrifice his Goblin to Goblin Bombardment to ping Kogla for 1, and that's the last damage he needed to kill him. And there's also a Gimli trigger. Combat is then moved to, and all of Matt's creatures' power and toughness are doubled. Matt will swing Ruric Thar at Jason, and Ardaz is put under the bus. The turn is then passed to Jason, and he'll start off by moving to combat and swinging a 5/5 dragon at Robbo. Robbo will respond by sacrificing 2 of his plants and his Siege Gang commander to Goblin Bombardment. 1 damage will go at Orcish Bowmasters, killing it, and then 2 go to Jason's face, and then Gimli will trigger 3 times, and upon the resolution of the 3rd one, Gimli will fight the dragon and kill it. Post-combat, Jason will cast OG Goro-Goro. Then the turn is passed to Caden, and he plays an island. Then he'll pass through his turn, so Matt's creatures are double power toughness now. Then on instep, Robbo will sacrifice 3 plants to Goblin Bombardment, pinging Jason 3 times. Then Gimli triggers 3 more times, and on the 3rd resolution, he fights Ruric Thar, and Gimli is at 12 power now. Matt decides to respond by paying 2 green and sacrificing Thar and Dockside to his Dominus so it gets an indestructible counter. We now move on to Robbo's turn, where he plays Skarg, the Rage Pits, as land for turn. Landfall trigger. Robbo then drops Azuri's Predation, and Jason drops the fastest delay I've ever seen. The turn is then passed to Matt, and he drops a Zerta Druid. He'll draw a card off casting it, and then he wants to draw another, so he'll drop Cankerbloom. Then he'll finally recast his Bane of Progress, drawing him another card. It'll destroy all artifacts and enchantments, but Robbo decides to draw with his Tome of Legends in response, and then the ability will resolve. After this, Matt will cast Swiftfoot Boots, then play Command Tower as land for turn. He'll then equip his Swiftfoot Boots to his Dominus, then pass the turn to Jason. And Jason starts off by casting Chartercourse. He'll draw 2 and discard 1, then recast Grazilax. The turn is then passed to Caden, who starts off with a Soul Ring, and it makes him a goblin. He'll then cast Salundi Visions, and he'll make 3 goblins, and then look at the top 6 and reveal Treasure Cruise, and it goes to his hand. And you better believe he only pays 1 mana for that Treasure Cruise, but he does make 8 goblins and draws 3 cards. Then he drops Magnus the Red. Caden will then move to combat, and all of Matt's creatures will double up, and then Caden swings 19 1/1s at Matt. Matt puts all 5 of his creatures under a goblin, and then he'll take 14. Caden will then play an island as land for turn, then pass the turn to Robbo, whose Azuri's Predation ticks down in exile. Then he'll cast a Skirk Prospector, then Squee Goblin Nabob. He'll then cast Anax, which was his hideaway card from Mosswort Bridge. Then he'll move to combat and swing his 12 power Gimli at Caden. Caden will chump with a 1/1, but Robbo responds before damage with a Teamer Battle Rage, giving Gimli double strike and trample. And unfortunately, Caden has no responses, so he is dead here. The turn is then passed to Matt, and he'll just recast Ruric Thar. And he does tap his Zerta Druid during this, so each of his opponents take a damage. He then puts the boots on Ruric Thar, and then passes the turn to Jason. And Jason immediately overloads a Cyclonic Rift. While he does take 6 from Ruric Thar, he'll then move to combat. He swings 8 over at Robbo and his 5/5 army at Matt, which will kill Matt. Jason gets to draw 2 cards off this, and post-combat he'll play a Storm-Carved Coast. Then he'll cast Arcane Signet and pass the turn. Robbo starts off with Skirk Prospector, and then Goblin and Archomancer. Then he casts Kami of the Whispered Hopes. Gimli is then recast, and then Anax, and then the turn is passed to Jason, who starts off with a Haunted Ridge. Then he'll cast Feed the Swarm, targeting Gimli. So Gimli dies, and Anax will make 2 1/1s that can't block. After this, Jason will cast Fire Covenant. He pays 7 life to target and kill all of Robbo's creatures, opening the way for a lethal swing. which means Jason, Goro-Goro and Satoru are the winners of today's video. Way to go! Well everybody, there you have it. That was one hell of a game. There was so much happening throughout the entire thing. Robbo, love you friend. Thank you so much for joining us. That Gimli deck was amazing. Everyone else who's watching, let us know what you thought down in the comments below, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, I know some of you are here at the end of the video to hear the results of the giveaway. Well, it's over and we selected a winner. We sent you an email. Please respond within 48 hours of that email being sent, or we're gonna have to pick someone else. Aside from that, there's not really much else for me to talk about, so thank you all again so much for watching us. I hope you all have a smooth day.